When Pro Set's first football cards came out back in 1989, they represented a total revolution in the football card market. We had never seen football cards that were anything even close to these. And yet Pro Set's millions of dollars in sales only lasted a few years. By 1992, the company had filed for bankruptcy, and Pro Set's final card set came out in 1993. The company that had started with so much promise didn't even last 5 years. So the obvious question here is what happened? I mean, how could a card company rise this quickly and fall this quickly and this hard? Why is it that Pro Set went bankrupt after less than 5 years? And more importantly, is there something that we can learn from the adventure of Pro Set that applies to modern card collecting and the modern world of card design? So let's dig in and find out. Ludwell Denny, the founder of Pro Set, was a former pilot and oil worker who started working with the NFL when he created a board game. That was this game, NFL Armchair Quarterback, which was originally released in 1986. Armchair Quarterback is the sort of game that you're surprised nobody had ever thought of before. It was basically a football play prediction game, one where you would play for house points. There are a total of 6 different predictions you can make on a single play, including things like run or pass, gain or no gain, whether it's a touchdown or not, and so on. And of course, they made a whole ton of these things. You can pick up a sealed one online for about 25 bucks. So I've read a lot of articles about Lud Denny when I was doing research for this video, and yet most people, including whoever wrote the Wikipedia page for Pro Set, have ignored the fact that Denny started off with that stupid board game. He was able to get the NFL logo on that game, which is what helped it sell. Otherwise, nobody would have bought the thing, and that's how his relationship began with NFL properties. Armchair Quarterback was featured as one of the best Christmas gifts for adult men for several years straight. And so I suppose it was only natural that Denny would then move over to the football card market next. But the thing is that the idea to jump into the football card market didn't come completely out of the blue. So to understand Pro Set and its meteoric rise, you have to understand first of all that football cards were in a really bad state by the late 1980s. When you combine that with the lasting effects of the 1987 NFL player strike, you can understand why the NFL wanted to do anything possible to get kids interested in the sport again. As you probably already know, 1988 was the year that junk wax of baseball cards became like really junky. Every single set printed in 1988 was printed in huge amounts, and baseball card stores were everywhere. And I specify baseball cards for a reason. Collectors were basically ignoring the cards for other sports. Fleer was the only company making basketball cards, and they were actually really hard to find. You could buy Topps hockey cards, but the design was pretty lame, and that set didn't even have 200 cards in it. Your only real choice for football was Topps, and these cards aren't much better looking than those hockey cards. As ugly as those Topps football cards of the late 1980s looked, at least they had the official NFL license. I bring this up because Topps didn't have that license for over a decade, and I'm pretty sure that's one of the major reasons why football card collecting never really took off. Without an NFL license, the older Topps cards had to be airbrushed to remove all of the NFL logos. As a result, these classic cards look really bland and really boring. It also did not help that Topps wound up using images of players like standing on the sideline or posing for the camera instead of, action shots. Even when the logos returned in 1982, it didn't really help all that much. The cards still looked really boring. Topps was really complacent with its football cards through the 1980s. It's the same thing that happened with Topps' hockey cards and also actually with Topps' basketball cards, where they finally just stopped printing them all together. Now, there was competition for Topps in the football card world of the 1970s and 80s. The thing is that Fleer also had this set of cards. They were the action photo card set, but honestly, when you look at those cards, they're pretty lame. Fleer didn't have the NFLPA license, but the company was able to get the NFL license. But without the player names, the cards were mostly just a mass of players involved in like some kind of running play. For action highlight cards, these cards are actually really boring. As a result, these cards are also really inexpensive and are still really easy to find. The truth is that there's never really been much of a market for team-focused cards like the ones that Fleer was putting out. So you had this trading card environment that was absolutely exploding, and yet at the same time, the quality of the football cards was so bad that nobody even wanted to touch them. You can see why the NFL was really hoping that a company would come along at the right time to try to change the nature of the market and where it stood. And Denny just so happened to be in the right place at the right time. Now, I'm not entirely sure how Denny managed to do it, but he was able to form a direct relationship with NFL properties to use the NFL's official photographs in his cards. As a result, ProSet's first set was referred to as the official football card of the NFL. Now, this is a very confusing distinction since Topps also had the official NFL license. Score did as well, and it's really hard to see why cards like this would be somehow deemed unofficial. As you can see clearly at the bottom of Score's cards, they clearly had both the NFL and the NFLPA licenses. And of course, nobody had ever heard of Denny or ProSet. Score was a relatively new company, but at least Score had 2 baseball card sets to his name by this time. And Topps, of course, had been around forever, though it had done a really bad job. But Denny did have that power of the NFL photography behind him, and he was also somehow to get enough capital together to make huge printing presses and run them like 24/7. The thing that really stands out about 1989 ProSet is the photography. ProSet was the only company using high-quality photos of players from actual NFL games, not just from training camp. And unlike those Fleer action cards, you could actually tell which player was featured in ProSet's cards. The overall effect was dramatic and really attractive. And it was like nothing that we had ever seen in the football card market before. In fact, if you're looking for something to compare early ProSet with, you really have to look at Upper Deck. Upper Deck's 1989 baseball cards came out just a few months before ProSet's football cards. Now, Upper Deck had a similar focus on action shots from actual games. Of course, Upper Deck had better color separation and also had those famous holograms on the back. Those are things that ProSet did not have. But the focus on attractive cards and action photos was common among both companies. And of course, both companies printed these cards like they were going out of style. You see, the mentality behind cards was different back in the late 1980s and the early 1990s, especially for the NFL. The NFL didn't care at all about whether a certain card would be worth any money in the long term. The focus was entirely on whether they could get more kids interested in the sport in the short term, basically by shoveling cards down their throats. And that strategy, as strange as it sounds, really worked. This June 1989 article estimated that ProSet would print 1.6 million copies of every card in its first set. That's a number that's probably a low estimate. You see, the NFL was really upset that trading cards were a $250 million a year industry, and yet less than 10% of that went to football cards. And to offset the fact that ProSet was printing cards in such crazy numbers, Denny started marketing his set as a living set. This living set idea basically meant that the presses were always on and that ProSet would print card variations as soon as anything changed. Now, if you're a collector of cards, like if you're serious about this, that idea sounds absolutely horrible. But you have to remember that the point here was not to create some rare or unusual card to reward somebody for opening a single pack. Instead, Denny wanted there to be as many variations as possible to give hardcore collectors an excuse to keep buying. So, for example, Denny boasted that ProSet had a card ready for Art Shell only 4 days after he was named head coach of the Los Angeles Raiders. That would be this card number 541 in 1989 ProSet. Shell was named head coach on October 3rd, 1989, which meant that he fit right into that 21-card final update series for 1989. Now, you can go nuts trying to collect the variations from ProSet, including little things like this Ditka card that's missing the Hall of Fame banner on the front. However, because these cards were so heavily overprinted, there is really no financial incentive to favor one of them over the other. And so in the long term, ProSet seems mostly like an anomaly. Sure, there were a couple of cards that were extremely rare and are actually worth some money, but you could get complete sets for less money today than you could back in 1989 when they were brand new, minus of course the extremely short printed cards. For example, this 1989 Santa Claus promo card was extremely short printed and is worth quite a bit of money. The concept behind this card was pretty good, though it was never really inserted into packs. Only hobby store owners could get their hands on it. Anyway, Denny's plan worked for a while at least. ProSet kept those printing presses running and kids kept buying packs and packs and packs of cards. And the money kept flowing in until the other companies caught up. In my opinion, 1990 ProSet is one of the best looking football card sets of all time. With 800 cards, there were a lot of cards to collect and the cards look absolutely beautiful. You can really see the influence of Upper Deck on this set, and it was this design that paved the way for the cards of the 1990s. Of course, these cards were printed like there was no tomorrow, though I don't think anybody really cared at the time. In contrast, Topps' 1990 football cards look really boring and old-fashioned, and there was an attempt by a company called Action Pack to fight against the ProSet juggernaut, though it didn't really work all that well. So it looked for a little while like everything that Le Denny was touching was going to turn to gold. And so Le Denny decided to expand his operations naturally, and this is where his problems really started. If you bought a bunch of 1990 ProSet Series 2 football packs, chances are that you came across a bunch of these Payne Stewart insert cards. That's right, ProSet decided to expand into the PGA Pro Tour golf trading card market, which is a market that barely even existed back then. The last time that a trading card company had seriously made PGA cards was Donruss back in 1982, and I'm betting that you've never seen any of these cards. To say that these cards were never popular is actually an understatement. Now, I'm not aware that there's ever really been much of a market for golf cards, and it really is kind of bizarre when you think about it. Now, the obvious move here for ProSet would have been to start making baseball cards. The thing that was happening is Major League Baseball's Player Association was very concerned about having too many companies going into the card market and competing and taking up all of the space. In fact, it was difficult for Upper Deck to get in at all because the association thought that 4 companies was more than enough. But you would think that by this point, ProSet would have at least enough money to make an offer they don't refuse, right? The thing is that these 1990 ProSet golf cards actually look pretty nice. This is a huge step above those cards that Donruss had printed way back in 1982. The problem though is that there just is not a market out there for cards like these. And of course, Denny and his company printed an almost unlimited number of these cards. The 1991 golf set looked a little bit less dramatic and a lot more commonplace. Even the backs looked like a step in the wrong direction. But I seriously remember seeing packs of these cards in every single box store and supermarket. These were everywhere back then. So the company decided to expand by printing cards for a sport that nobody really wanted cards of, and then they doubled down the next year by totally flooding the market. And ProSet didn't just do this for golf. There was also this 1991 racing set. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, these cards actually look pretty cool, even if you're like me and you don't really care much for racing. But you do have to wonder what exactly Denny was hoping to accomplish with trading cards like these. A lot of these cards wound up being simply profile pictures of the drivers. And of course, since these were printed to oblivion, there is very little collector demand for any of this, especially these days. So those racing cards came out in 1991, right? The company had been around for 3 years by this time and had only been actually making money for 2. It seems a little bit aggressive to just jump into new markets that quickly, but Denny simply refused to stop. ProSet also decided to enter the English soccer card market in 1990, and this was an absolute mistake. There's no question about that. It's not that the ProSet cards looked bad, they looked okay, though the photography was not really that great. The problem instead was that there was simply no market for soccer cards. And that's probably something that Denny should have, researched before he printed millions of these packs. Now, the thing is that there was a market for soccer cards, at least once upon a time. There was this old British company called A&BC. They made chewing gum, and they also made cards that went along with the gum for decades. In fact, they had partnered with Topps for something like 15 years. In fact, some of those old A&BC gum cards should look familiar to you. It turns out that Topps assisted the small British firm both with design and with printing. However, the two companies had some kind of disagreement sometime in the early 1970s. A&BC and Topps ended the partnership, and A&BC went out of business like the next year. There were action cards like these that were sold together with candy sticks for years from a different company. But these were advertised as candy sticks with a bonus picture card, not as a pack of cards with a stick of gum. And so once again, you have to wonder why ProSet thought that there was a market for something like this. And ProSet printed just so many of these cards. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Now, the cards clearly did not sell. You can still find sealed boxes of this product on eBay for like 15 bucks, and you can probably get it for cheaper if you make an offer. As you can see, the problem that Denny had is that he wanted to expand his company way too fast, and he wanted to expand it into markets that were totally unproven. But he also decided to expand into hockey cards. Unlike golf and racing, hockey cards have a tradition that goes back a long time. Hockey cards were also fairly large in the sports card market of 1990. The NHL was doing a lot better than the NFL was in that respect. ProSet's 1990 NHL set looks a lot like its 1990 NFL set. Now, the photography here is not quite as nice as the NFL properties photography, though it's still okay. And the card backs fit in with that ProSet formula. ProSet's problem is that another company decided to make hockey cards in 1990. That company, of course, was Upper Deck. Upper Deck's 1990 NHL set simply looks better than the ProSet set. The fronts and the backs look better, and the cards have this real dramatic feel to them. Upper Deck also went out on a limb and made a French language set that year. ProSet's problem was that it simply could not compete with Upper Deck in terms of quality. And so kids across North America decided to buy these packs instead of the ProSet hockey packs. Well, I guess you could just chalk this up to bad luck. Actually, both ProSet and Upper Deck were in a similar situation in 1990. Now, Upper Deck could take risks because its baseball card line was so solid. ProSet apparently thought that its NFL card line gave it similar financial leverage. But ProSet decided to expand into tons of card lines and tons of sports all at the same time, and that's what its big mistake was. Upper Deck had better quality. Upper Deck limited the number of sports it expanded to at least that second year, and in the end, Upper Deck also got a license that ProSet simply couldn't match. When I was a kid, I remember seeing these Upper Deck Looney Tunes comic ball baseball cards everywhere. These were the really cheap packs you could get at the grocery stores, and I got tons of them. The first set consisted of 2 different cards, front and back, which was a pretty kind of weird idea. I guess the idea was that you were going to tell some sort of comic story with the cards. By 1991, however, the cards were a little bit more predictable, and they featured stars like Nolan Ryan and Reggie Jackson along with all of the Looney Tunes characters. So that's a gimmick that seems really strange in hindsight, I know, but it worked really well at the time. At least I know that I bought a whole ton of these cards, and I'm pretty sure that these cards ended up selling really well. And then in 1991, Upper Deck moved into the NFL card market, which itself was a major assault on ProSet's base. 1991 ProSet football was the best looking ProSet design to date. The fronts and backs of these cards simply look amazing. The problem, though, is that Upper Deck's football cards looked even better. Once again, Upper Deck's understanding of color separation and the clearly superior Upper Deck printing technology gave the company a distinct advantage. And so in the end, ProSet had no choice but to do what every other card manufacturer was doing in 1991. This should set off alarm bells in your mind. ProSet decided to make a separate premium card line to try to compete directly with Upper Deck. Now, you've got to remember that Upper Deck's base packs were more expensive than the normal base packs that other companies sold. That includes ProSet's football cards. And so instead of choosing to upgrade the base set to compete and maybe charging a little bit more money, every other company decided to create a special premium line that would sell in packs that cost more money to try to compete. So, for example, 1991 Topps football looked like this. It was a really crappy design with really boring pictures. To compete with Upper Deck, Topps also created the Stadium Club brand, which was the premium brand. The fronts and backs looked dramatically better than the base set, but of course the packs cost more money. Fleer had a pretty ugly and bland design for its base 1991 football card set. If you wanted something that, actually looked good, you had to splurge for a pack of 1991 Fleer Ultra. And Score's 1991 base set also looked pretty generic. In theory, Pinnacle was Score's premium brand, though I think that these cards are as ugly as sin. So in hindsight, this really was kind of an odd trend. To be honest with you, I've looked into this for years and I still don't really understand what the logic was. But as you know, we're still seeing the effects of this to this day. Modern base cards, like if you look at Top Series 1 2026 baseball, which just came out, they look ugly as sin. And you've got to then spend extra money on packs of something like, I don't know, like Stadium Club, if you want cards that actually don't totally suck, you know, that look pretty nice. Meanwhile, Upper Deck offered only a single line of football cards in 1991. There was no premium line because the base set was the premium product. And those premium base cards sold better than all of the competing more expensive premium brands anyway, right? So as you can see, the real answer was to upgrade your baseline instead of trying to do a cheap line and a more expensive line, right? And it should have been obvious to people. Anyway, Pro said instead of doing that, decided to just join the crowd, and this is what the biggest mistake of all really was. This Thurman Thomas base card actually looks good. I would argue that this looks just as nice as anything that Upper Deck's football cards had to offer in 1990. Pro Set's biggest advantage was almost certainly these card backs, which provided more information than any other company. Pro Set's Platinum card for Thomas looked like this, and I guess that this is supposed to be an improvement. If you ask me, this looks more like it should be part of an insert set than a set that you pay extra money for. And so now Pro Set was printing another football card set on top of its already expanded line of products. And unfortunately, that was a set that nobody wanted to buy. All right, so hindsight is 20/20, right? What is obvious in retrospect is that Pro Set's advantage was the fact that its cards were borderless. The NFL Properties photography looked absolutely awesome too, especially in 1990 and 1991. What Pro Set needed to do to compete with Upper Deck was to focus on its strengths instead of coming out with a bunch of these stupid sets using like black and white backgrounds and Photoshop and whatever to try to fight with Upper Deck. It was never going to work. Unfortunately for Denny, there was not a lot of time for him to do experimentation to see if this would work or if that would work better. Pro Set's 1991 hockey set looks perfectly fine, at least in my opinion. The problem though was that Upper Deck had established itself as the premium hockey brand by that time. And so Pro Set decided to acquire and resurrect the old Parkhurst brand as a sort of premium line, even though the design looked worse than the Pro Set base set. Pro Set also decided to test the waters with a French language set, which followed in the footsteps of what Upper Deck did in 1990. There was even a French variety of the Parkhurst set. Now, what you have to realize is that there was basically no market whatsoever for French language hockey cards. Upper Deck realized that far too late in 1990, and it decided to deal with this by artificially creating some demand. They sent out rumors that the high number Upper Deck French hockey series was dramatically underprinted, which led to a really crazy short-term bubble, one of the craziest bubbles in the history of modern sports cards. I actually have a video about this over on my hockey channel. You should check it out. Now, Pro Set did not get that memo and decided instead to print millions of copies of all of those French language cards. They are worthless today, nobody bought them, and all of that printing caught up with the company really quickly. By August 1992, Pro Set filed for bankruptcy. I mean, it was obvious to anybody that this was going to happen. 1992 Pro Set football is not awful, but the colors just are not as bright as they were in previous years. The problem, though, is that kids just were not interested in these cards anymore. And Pro Set still, after all of this, had not learned its lesson about the dangers of making a premium card line. Pro Set rebranded its premium line as Pro Set Power in 1992 and called that the Premier Set. The packaging looks really boring and the cards simply did not sell. And the worst part is that the cards look contrived. It's almost like they're photoshopped. It was the failure of this set that pushed Pro Set towards bankruptcy. The 1992 Pro Set hockey cards are a significant step back from the 1991 cards. And the Parkhurst set looks flat and boring, almost as bad as the Bowman hockey card sets that Topps came out with back in those days. So the problem that Pro Set had here is a very basic problem. It did not have enough money to pay for the licenses that it had built up over the years. In fact, it was a few $1,000,000 short of paying for the various NHL licenses, right? And we're talking like a couple $1,000,000, right? If you look at what the company was making in like 1990, it was making sort of like 9 figures, right? Hundreds of millions. But the spending of the money didn't exactly go in accordance with plan, and that's how they ran into the bankruptcy problem. That's a pretty good sign that Pro Set probably should not have expanded to so many sports and so many markets in such a short time. There was a slight recession in 1992, which didn't help, but the perception at the time was that Pro Set was running through money like it was going out of style. There were some people who were worried that Pro Set's problems reflected problems in the trading card industry as a whole. However, the truth is that Pro Set's insistence on printing as many cards as humanly possible is likely the reason customers lost their faith in the product. So there's that fact, plus the fact that the packs honestly just did not have anything special to offer. And this is where we really can touch on the modern card industry and the things that fanatics and tops really need to learn from the Pro Set example. If you look at the packaging for 1992 Pro Set football, you'll notice that nothing is really advertised as being a premium insert. There's this somewhat unclear mention of 4 bonus hologram cards, though it's not clear from the box what that refers to. It turns out that there was a set of 4 Emmitt Smith hologram cards, though they aren't really worth much money these days anyway. The box does not tell you about Pro Set's gold cards, which unfortunately were also overprinted. But the big kicker is that Pro Set also randomly inserted autographed and numbered cards, something that the company did not advertise at all. This was an absolutely huge mistake. The thing is that collectors back then and today just love the chase for an elusive and very short printed premium product. Pro Set had that product, but the company just didn't talk about it. It didn't advertise it. It boggles my mind. If they had just talked about this, everything would have been fine. In comparison, Upper Deck's baseball set in 1991 had this special Find the Nolan promotion. The backs of those packs would tell you that there were 2,500 personally autographed Nolan Ryan cards. That's precisely what collectors wanted to hear and find. It was inserts like these that made pack opening feel like something special. And Upper Deck wound up being synonymous with autographed inserts, even though companies like Pro Set were doing the same thing. This was largely the result of extremely poor advertising. The thing is, you have to remember, card collectors want to experience something special with every pack. That's the reason why you see dozens and dozens of these stupid parallels and, like color variations and all this other crap today, right? Because it feels special. That something special goes beyond just card design, though you have to remember that card design is also really important. Now, nothing will save you if your card design sucks. That was the problem with 1993 Pro Set. These cards just are not attractive, which is probably the biggest reason why nobody bought them. But Pro Set's 1991 set looks simply fantastic. The problem, though, is the chances were really good that your average pack would contain nothing of any value or interest. Again, if Pro Set had even mentioned the fact that there were extremely limited numbers of authentic Lawrence Taylor autographed cards in those 1991 packs, maybe people would have bought them. You probably don't realize that they also inserted Ozzie Newsome autographed cards like this one. The problem is that the vast majority of packs only had these crappy playbook cards as an insert, something that grew really old really fast. The thing is that collectors want to feel like they've got something really special in every pack, not that most packs contain nothing but commons and junk. So this is the one thing that modern cards tend to do well. The one company left, which is Topps and Fanatics, as much as I'd hate to say that name, that one company left has learned the hard way that you have to make inserts that are actually meaningful. But the problem that we have these days is that the base set looks as ugly as sin. It really does. Look at 2026 Topps, Series 1. Compare any of those cards to 1991 Pro Set football, right? And you'll see right away the modern cards suck and you would rather have the older cards. Now, the problem that you have when you have a base set that is as ugly as sin, and when you combine that with increasing the print run of those ugly base cards in hopes that people will spend more money chasing after your stupid lottery cards, is that you run into this potential for a catastrophe. The catastrophe is called nobody buys any of your crap anymore and you go bankrupt. So it's too early for us to say what the 2026 football cards are going to look like, but I can tell you that 2026 Topps Baseball looks like utter garbage. This is one of the most boring card designs I've ever seen, and it looks like Topps baseball cards have looked for the last 10 years. I guess it's a good thing that Topps includes dozens upon dozens of different insert sets to keep you interested, even though it's absolutely impossible to keep up with all of these. But some of these foil parallel sets look just like garbage, and I've got to wonder when collectors are going to get tired of the endless parade of parallel products. The thing that helped Pro Set stand out in the football market was the high quality of its base cards, and notice that they figured out a way to get rid of those ugly and pointless borders. It might take a few years, but one of these days, somebody's going to realize that collectors really like base cards that look nice instead of dozens of stupid parallel sets that are variations of the same old crap. And honestly, I really do think that we will see competition in the sports card industry before long. Look, I know that Fanatics is a major monopoly, I know, and I feel the pain, but I do not think that the people who are running Fanatics today are any smarter than Denny. In fact, I think that they are dumber. ProSet was on the top of the market briefly, but then everything came crashing down because he kept the printers running non-stop and because he didn't know how to advertise his product and he didn't know what collectors actually wanted. I seriously think we might see something very similar happen again. There were rumors in the middle of 1994 that somebody might buy the company and save it from utter destruction. But if you look closely, you will realize that there wasn't much to get other than a few crappy licenses and a lot of debt. Actually, the big question in August 1994 was whether ProSet could survive long enough for somebody to actually buy its remaining assets. By October, it was clear that no buyer was going to come forward to save the company, and so it totally died off. So what do we learn from all of this? Well, we learned that ProSet rode on this wave of trading card hype and it crashed and burned in the space of less than 5 years. Now, the trading card industry itself has managed to survive, though a lot of companies followed suit over time. I do think that the trading card industry itself will survive into the future. We will have to see how well it survives the mismanagement and the ridiculous policies of Fanatics. Personally, I think the Fanatics is far worse run and worse managed than ProSet ever was, and that's really saying something. Now, as for modern cards, I'm not going to tell you guys what to do, though you really might want to hold off on trying to get those stupid one-of-one serial hits or those whatever like purple colored cards or something. Instead, go back to the past and take a look at some of these forgotten cards because you might find a couple of diamonds in the rough.